Going to talk about a couple studies today about choking under pressure. This first one involved 3 Rhesus monkeys. It was published just a few weeks ago, a neural basis for choking under pressure. And this other one is from about 9 years ago, out of control. Diminished prefrontal activity coincides with impaired motor performance due to choking under pressure. And this one was a study of about 26 human beings. So let's talk about the monkeys first. All 3 of them had electrodes placed on their head that could read the individual impulses from several neurons in different sectors of their brains. They all got to perform multiple trials of this hand-eye coordination test that was done under time. And what would happen, they'd get to see the center, then this cursor would show up that would tell them how big the reward was. And then they had to move the little cursor over to the target. They were only given 0.75 seconds to get it to the target. Now, depending on the color, they knew what reward they would get. A small reward was basically nothing. Otherwise, they got a small amount of a sugary drink. So medium was just 0.2 of a milliliter, and then the jackpot, which would show up in black, was 2 full milliliters. So the color was their cue for the size of the reward. So they were taught what the reward would be and then tested to make sure they understood what the reward was before they performed this particular test. Now, the particular neural activity that the researchers were looking at was activity in the reward centers, the executive function, and the motor cortices of these monkeys. And they had 3 different hypotheses for why these animals might choke under pressure when it was time to get the jackpot reward. The first they looked at was maybe the jackpot just doesn't trigger the reward pathways enough. And you can think about that as maybe just seeing the possibility of the jackpot reward would actually kind of trigger a kind of disbelief. Their second hypothesis was that maybe seeing the jackpot cue would just create too much activity in the reward centers of their brain, and that would interfere with activity in the motor cortex. And their third hypothesis is that there would just be too much noise within their entire brain when they saw that jackpot cue, and they just wouldn't be able to focus at all on anything. So before we get to their results, let's talk about the study with the people. Now, in this study, each of the participants was promised $100, but they were allowed to gamble that $100 and try to earn more money by doing this particular task. And the task involved moving this little green caterpillar into that red square. They basically had 2 seconds to do it, and it was performed just with a little dial. And they were told what the reward would be, $5, $10, or $40, given a moment to prepare, and then they had to knock out the task. While this was done, they also had electrodes placed on their heads. Now, for the experiment, it was found that when the reward was just $5, accuracy was at its bottom. It actually peaked when the reward was $10, and then at 40, it fell off again. So you could see that when pressure was higher, they were more likely to choke. The participants were given a 30-question survey that looked at their impulsivity as a trait. And it was found that the more impulsive a participant was, the more likely they were to choke under pressure. So less impulsive people tended to be better when the pressure was on. Now, the researchers found that several parts of the brain would become active when the jackpot reward was on the line. So obviously the motor and premotor cortices would activate, but they found that participants were more likely to hit the jackpot when the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex was also more activated. And that makes a lot of sense because this prefrontal cortex controls executive function. So let's talk about the monkeys again. You can see a similar pattern in the success rate between the monkeys and the humans. When rewards were small, they were less likely to score. And then at medium and large rewards, they did well, but then performance fell off again when they had a potential for hitting a jackpot. And it was true for all three of the monkeys. These three graphs up here show that reward size versus success curve. Now, monkey E was kind of the goat. He did extremely well compared to the other two. In light gray, it shows where they undershot, and in dark gray, it shows where they overshot. And you can see that when the reward was small, they were more likely to overshoot. But when they were faced with winning the jackpot, they were more likely to undershoot. So we could say that overshooting was a result of caring too little, while undershooting was a result of caring too much. So how does this relate to neural activity in the motor cortex, what the researchers called the target preparation axis? Well, basically, in all three monkeys, activity in that motor cortex peaked when the rewards were at medium and large, but it fell off when it went to jackpot. So looking at the neural noise hypothesis, they looked at the amount of noise variance between the various reward levels. And what they found was that the noise variance just wasn't consistent across the different monkeys. So they looked at overall neural noise variance that was going on with these monkeys at different reward levels. And what they found was that there was no consistent pattern between the monkeys, between the amount of noise and the amount of reward they were offered. So based on this, they rejected their third hypothesis that neural noise was interfering with their ability to complete the task. Instead, what they found was that when the rewards were at their highest, the reward axis in their brain would become much more active, and it would reduce the amount of activity in the motor cortex. So basically, so much of the monkey's brain's resources were being spent on thinking about the reward that they couldn't focus on completing the task. And you can actually kind of see that here. When the monkeys would overshoot, their neural activity wasn't all that much different from when they succeeded. But when they would undershoot, which happened more often when they were presented with the jackpot, their neural activity was significantly different from when they succeeded. Now, an interesting thing that happened with both the monkeys and the humans is that they both performed better at getting the jackpot in the second half of the test than at the first half. So performing well under pressure doesn't just depend on practicing the task itself, it also depends on practicing under pressure. So keep on shooting for those jackpots and don't be worried about missing, because the more you see the jackpot, the better you'll be able to hit the target when the pressure's really on.